In this video, we will compare a dirty used Windows install compared to a fresh one. Let's take a look. For the test system, all of the specs are on the screen and there are more available at wirestech.org. I'll be using a stock Ryzen 5 5600 and a stock RTX 3070 with 8 gigs of GDDR6. For the test SSDs, the dirty used Windows install is my Samsung 990 Pro 2TB, which has about 550 to 600 GB left out of the 2 TB. The clean Windows install is my Samsung 860 EVO 500GB, which has about 386 GB available out of the 500. Keep in mind that all of the game benchmarks are not on the SSDs and are on separate drives. The CPU benchmarks are all run from the SSDs themselves. All benchmarks will be performed on a 3-run average, except for Cinebench 2024, which will only be run on a 1-run average. Rebar is on, DLSS is off, and all benchmarks will be done at native 1080p. Alright, let's head to the benchmarks. In the CPU benchmarks, I just have to apologize for the graphs. The numbers are really close, but the bar graph is showing a really large gap. Please keep this in mind when looking at the graphs, as this goes for the CPU benchmarks. For the first CPU benchmark, we have 3D Mark Time Spy Extreme. On the fresh Windows install, we got a CPU score of 4065.67 on a 3-run average, compared to the used Windows install of 3974. This is a percentage difference of 2%, which isn't too much higher, and really doesn't show much of a difference between the clean and dirty Windows installs. On the 7-zip benchmark, I am taking the decompression results, and the clean drive score was 7 points above the dirty drive score, which was quite a bit higher. Whilst both PCs had programs on the taskbar closed, as shown here, there are most likely lingering programs that inhibit the performance on the used dirty Windows drive. Even with the Blender benchmark, we are seeing a similar trend, with the clean drive performing slightly better by about 5.79%. Not too much to say here, but the increase in performance is nice. Cinebench 2024 is up, and I have to note this is done on a 1-run average only, so that means I have only run Cinebench once. All the other benchmarks in this entire video are done on a 3-run average. Cinebench, the percentage difference was a little bit higher at about 7%, which was a decent uplift over the dirty Windows drive, and overall not too bad of a result at all. Now to the games. For the first game, we have a Plague Tale Requiem on Ultra settings. Both the clean and used installs played out basically the same on average FPS, being only a 1.26% difference. However, the 1% lows were the largest uplift out of any benchmark game here at a 14% difference. For Assassin's Creed Valhalla on Ultra settings, the performance between the clean and dirty installs was nearly identical in terms of average FPS. The clean install had a marginal increase, reaching 113.03 FPS compared to the 112.53 FPS on the dirty install, a difference of only 0.44%. However, the 1% lows saw a more noticeable difference, with the clean install performing better at 80.30 FPS compared to 76.67 FPS, which is a 4.74% improvement. Cyberpunk 2077 on Ultra settings had the clean install outperforming the dirty install slightly. Average FPS increased by a 1.14% from 99.30 to 100.43 FPS. The 1% lows had a similar improvement by only 1.45%, from 64.17 to 65.10. The overall difference in the performance here is pretty minimal. Next is Hitman 3 on Ultra settings. The clean install saw a notable improvement. Average FPS increased by 5.93% from 169.40 to 179.43 FPS. The 1% lows also saw a pretty significant boost, jumping 13.30% from 117.30 100.03 to 132.63 FPS. These uplifts resulted in a pretty much smoother experience overall on the clean drive, but at the same time, the dirty drive did perform quite well. Hogwarts Legacy on ultra settings had the dirty install perform in the 1% lows a little bit better, with being 49.57 FPS compared to 26.33 FPS on the clean install. This is a 88% increase. However, the average FPS only showed a minor difference, with the clean install being 71.83 FPS and the dirty install being 74.47 FPS, a 3.6% higher average for the dirty install. Now, I'm not really sure of this title anymore and what to make of it. It seems like Hogwarts Legacy is just a bit annoying to run, but yes, in this case, the dirty drive did perform much better in the 1% lows, and I did redo the clean drive 2 more times, so a total of 3 times. So I'm pretty sure that the dirty drive just performed a bit better, but I'm not too sure what the cause is. I've looked through the settings on Windows and the NVIDIA control panel settings and the settings in game. There's literally no difference. However, the dirty drive just seems to be a bit better in this instance. Next up is Horizon Zero Dawn on ultra settings. The clean install performs slightly better with an average FPS of 134.47 compared to 129.50 on the dirty install, making a 3.83% improvement. The 1% lows also saw an increase, with the clean install reaching 87.0 FPS versus 84.27 FPS on the dirty install, showing a 3.32% uplift. Overall, both results were pretty similar, but the average FPS was slightly better on the clean drive. Ratchet and Clank: A Rift Apart was a little bit interesting, with the dirty install performing slightly better in the 1% lows, being at 69 compared to the 66.53 FPS. Although this isn't much of a margin, it is a slight increase. However, the average FPS was nearly identical, with the clean install being at 95.07 FPS and the dirty install being at 94.33 FPS. This was only a 0.78% difference. On this title, the performance was pretty much the same between the two. We see something similar in A Shadow of the Tomb Raider 2018, where the performance was pretty much the same. On average FPS at 144.27 for the clean install and 143.27 on the dirty install. This is really minimal and only a 0.7% increase. However, the 1% lows showed a slightly larger difference, with the clean install reaching 114.73 compared to the 109.23 FPS on the dirty install. This is pretty much a small improvement, but it is a little bit of 5%, but overall the improvement uplift of both of them was very similar, and just the 1% lows was the only difference in this title. Last is the Callisto Protocol on high settings. We have the average FPS increasing by just 0.56% from 117.97 to 118.63. So literally pretty much the same on both of the titles. And it's pretty much the same again with the 1% lows. It's just an improvement of 0.39%. So they basically performed exactly the same on both of the clean and dirty installs. It's honestly no difference on this title as well. Now for the overall comparisons. On the CPU benchmarks, there was a slight improvement in performance for all benchmarks on the clean Windows install, with the highest being 7-zip at a 8% difference. Overall, the clean drive was 7% faster on average compared to the used dirty Windows drive. The average FPS had an admirable attempt at improving, with the clean drive being about 7% faster than the used install. Notably, Hitman 3 had a 6% performance difference and also improved in the 1% lows, as you will see soon. Unfortunately, the mode for this dataset is 1, and as you can see, the 6 games here only had between a 0 and 2% performance difference, so not too much of an improvement. We have Hogwarts Legacy, both in the average FPS and 1% lows performing worse on the clean Windows install. For the 1% lows average, we see that Hogwarts Legacy did produce some problems for the clean Windows install, at a 61% performance difference compared to the used drive. If I include this result, then the clean drive was 2% slower on the 1% lows, but I don't think this is fair. So if I remove Hogwarts Legacy from the graph, we only have 8 games, and the clean drive was 10% faster on average on the 1% lows compared to the used dirty Windows install. Now Ratchet & Clank, A Rift Apart is the only other title which had worse performance on the clean drive for 1% lows, being at a 4% difference. But notably, on the average FPS, there was a rounded up 1% difference on average FPS. As mentioned before, most of the games being 6 out of 9 had a percentage difference between 0 and 2% on average FPS. However, we can see that the 1% lows had a nice uplift on the clean drive. So not too much of an improvement in average FPS, but the 1% lows had a decent uplift. Here are my final thoughts. Whilst the average FPS on most games didn't improve too much, the 1% lows did improve on the clean Windows install. It's important to remember that a clean Windows install should not have any lingering programs in the background. A Plague Tale Requiem and Hitman 3 both did really well with the 1% lows uplift. I'd love to retest this with different hardware and a better CPU in the future. It was interesting that all 4 CPU benchmarks benefited from a clean Windows install, which could show that some day-to-day tasks become slower over time on a dirty, used Windows install. Now that's not to say that all of this is solid evidence, but it gives an indication. The truth is that on day-to-day tasks, if you're experiencing lag on Windows, one of the easiest things to do is to do a fresh, clean install to see if you really need to upgrade any component on your PC. I'd say it's good practice to do a reinstall once in a while, as many programs will be eliminated that could be inhibiting performance. That about sums it up. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.